Thank you all for being here. TUKUY Shunguan, from the depths of my heart. I am so delighted to be with you. And so far, this has been a wonderful workshop and a wonderful way to connect with each other at a time that I hope is the end of the pandemic. But to feel a sense of connectedness with each other has been a real joy for me. So for many, many years, I've been traveling the world and teaching, and I got a nice rest with the pandemic. And that way it was beneficial for me and allowed me to develop this new form of teaching with Brian James. And Brian, I love the Rumi poem you shared. I actually contemplated sharing that myself today. It was the first Rumi poem I ever read. And I saw the name Rumi under it about 30 years ago. And I asked some friends, have you ever heard of this guy Rumi? I said, oh yeah, he's one of the greats, you know. And not too long after that, Coleman Barks came out with a beautiful illuminated Rumi book, and I bought it and just gobbled it up. It's great stuff. And when I began working with Don Alberto, the Quechua artist teacher of mine, I noticed a great affinity between his teachings and Rumi's. Of course, he's one of those perennialists that would say that, you know, if you dig deep enough, the truth is one everywhere. And in fact, the truth of the heart is one everywhere. The heart, I mentioned at the beginning of this course, the shaman's heart, heart path heart. This is not the emotional heart. Emotional heart is made up of parts of yourself, parts of personalities that have different attitudes and feelings and thoughts, emotions. And often they hijack you, distract from your path, your true heart path. But the heart itself, it's like the Shiva of the Shiva Sutras. This is not the big masculine looking Shiva with a snake on his head and, you know, leopard skins and that sort of thing. But the Shiva of the universal all-pervading consciousness, which is within the hearts of all of us. And we all participate in that. And for the heart to be fully open means that this kind of consciousness is shining and directing our lives and guiding our paths. It's the force of life, the force of healing. Don Alberto called it Hatun. Hatun Mama. Each of these are emanations of it and are within it, and it's within them, but it's the same fundamental reality. So when your heart is open, that means you've created space from those emotional parts so that your true being, consciousness, and bliss can unfold and be of use to you in your life and in connecting with others and connecting with yourself and healing and in worship, which is a way to strengthen the connection and so on. The theme or topic of today's teaching has to do with clearing the heart path, really, from the parts of us that get in the way and distract us or pull us off of it or block us. And it's truly a shamanic insight that the soul is, in the depth psychological sense, the soul, the inner life, is made up of multiple parts. Jung himself said, we keep mistaking that, thinking that we are one inside. We are decidedly not. Jung stressed the polycentric multiplicity of the psyche, you know, and he was thinking instincts, archetypes, complexes, autonomous complexes, various principles that rule and govern our lives, various roles we play, and so on. And each one of them has their own desires, their own point of view, their own agendas, you know, and some of them are wounded, or some of them are programmed in a negative way from early childhood on. So these are the parts that then can sabotage us, get in the way, and pull us off the path. On the other hand, from the Quechua shamanic point of view, that's part of the game. You need those parts to be causing you some suffering and some difficulties so you can push off against them and liberate yourself. Because in the process of acquiring conditioning and wounds or traumas, you actually forget who you are, what you are. And so the process of remembering requires that you suffer enough to go, what the heck is this suffering here for? And what can I do about it? And it becomes the path to finding out who you really are and what you're here for, and what you have to look forward beyond this life when you die. There is no death really, but the form of life that you've taken on here and the Kalsai energy, the life force that runs through it, only the life force remains. The form, the personality system, the ego, all that dissolves after death. But there's a residue of consciousness, energies that you've lived that can govern the states that you end up in when you die. And that can be a heaven or a hell or someplace in between. So being able to clean our hearts and minds of the conditionings and the wounds and traumas is essential to the shamanic path of the heart, so that we are free to live fully what we are and can bring our gifts and our skills to the world and be of service and heal ourselves first, so that we can really be a good vehicle to be of service to others. We all have a calling in life, and a calling, you might say I was called onto the shamanic path or the Jungian path of individuation, but these two are vehicles. They are, first you have to be here and you have to show up, and you have to discover what you are and why you're here. And this is a more fundamental question, more fundamental issue. First of all, I think we're here to be alive, to truly undergo the experience of life, and losing consciousness or awareness of who we are and regaining it, and developing our presence in the process of that. And if you ask me, what's the ultimate definition of true nature? I might say, well, that's a mystery, but I can say it's awareness. It's infinite awareness, and awareness is not biased. It's not prejudiced. It can observe what's going on in you. It can observe all your parts. It doesn't have to take a position against them. It doesn't join in the conflict and the war. It can listen to each part of you with great compassion, and then help you learn how you two could work together in a more harmonious equilibrium, in a peaceful way, instead of being at war with yourself. So this topic today is really about how to get there, and what stands in the way of that, and what we can do. And to really teach this would require we work together a long time, or have a number of week-long retreats or something, to really get into the depth of it. But what I want to attain today is enough understanding and resources that you can begin or carry on, if you're already in this kind of work, after this workshop. So I'm not going to go into deep traumas today. I might share a little of my own, but I will teach you about how to find parts of yourself that you disown, and maybe select one or two of them to begin loving. And when you love them unconditionally, you transmute them into allies, so that the parts of yourself that you reject or you don't want to deal with, or that humiliate you, whatever, can become an actual ally. It's here with you for some reason. And it too has gifts to bring you, so that you can bring your gifts to the world. And that reminds me of another Rumi poem. I ran across. I don't know what the poem is, but he says, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. Now, for Rumi, love is our true nature, and it is divinity. And so living your divinity, living your true nature, requires, first of all, that you realize where you're not living it and what's keeping you from living it. I want to read this again. Your task is not to seek for love. Stop there. And I'll say that seeking for love means we're looking outside ourselves. Yeah, somebody out there will love us. Somebody out there will respect us. Somebody else out there will see us and confirm us or validate us or something like that. So this is seeking for love, as I call it, in all the wrong places. You can spend your whole life doing that and you will never feel secure in love because it doesn't come to you that way. When people love you, usually it's conditional. It's based on what you do for them. They might truly be like a Buddha and have the depth of love, just compassion, so that they don't need to praise you or blame you. They just accept you as you are. And that's a beautiful kind of love. And that can inspire you to get there yourself. But just its act doesn't take you there. It can awaken you, it can inspire you. And I think that's part of what we want to do with our lives, is to have love for ourselves so we can rightly love others and not wrongly love others. But merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself. The barriers are the partitions that our other parts of our multiplicity put up. The barriers are their beliefs, their disagreements, their attitudes. Attitudes are always emotionally colored, like, I don't trust you, I don't trust anybody. That's an attitude that we can take. And people who usually have that attitude usually are very solitary. They don't experience much intimacy. They don't experience much community. I'm all right, Jack. I'm going to do my own thing. You do yours. So that's usually a cover, a rationale for not facing their own suffering. And part of that is the lack of trust. They don't trust others because they don't trust themselves, not just because somebody broke their trust in the past. But merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. And we do build barriers, even in the worst traumas. We do that because our emotional selves react, our emotional bodies, and our minds react. Our emotional bodies react with tremendous fear, tremendous pain, and tremendous rage to trauma when it's perpetrated on us, enough to break faith. But our minds react also with fear-based beliefs. They make up new rules to protect us in the future from this ever happening again, and so on. And we can have so many parts with beliefs like that are fear-based, that it controls our emotional life as well. It won't allow us to trust, to have faith, to surrender, to be vulnerable, to really deeply love and be affected, or to grieve, because that making us vulnerable is dangerous according to our thinking parts. So if we finish Rumi's poem, we would have to say something about what we can do then to pull down those barriers, so that we can transmute what those barriers are into portals, allies, companions on the heart path. So a good place to begin this discussion has to do with Jung's shadow. The concept of the shadow he came up with. It's kind of a mythological or fantasy term, but his idea was anything substantial casts a shadow. So you've seen the shadow of a tree. You've probably seen yourself, maybe as a kid, you'd walk with your bicycle or something, seen your shadow, So there's the light side and the dark side, and you can't be without your shadow. That's the metaphor. The shadow is based on polar oppositions. When it comes to your view of yourself and others, you're either looking at things as good or you're looking at things as bad, things as attractive, things as unattractive, things as desirable, things as undesirable, things that are good, things that are bad. For Jung, there are these three characteristics of the personal psyche. One was called the persona, which is the mask, as he put it, that you wear, like the Greek actors. They had different masks so they could play different characters in a single play. They just put a mask on, okay, now I'm the king, put another mask on, now I'm the fool, and so on. So we do that with the roles we play. Each one of us has a part that is a father or a mother, a parent. And we each have a part that's a child, we each have a part that has skills, can do a profession, a craft. If you're an artist, you do an art show. Well, you want to look good, and you want your work to look good, have impact, and so on. So you've got your artist persona on, and so on. The thing about the persona is you need it to connect. It's a point of connection with the social world. There's nothing at all wrong with having a persona. Some of the most interesting people that ever were had multiple personas, and that's what made them interesting. The thing is not to be identified with your persona. Because if you think your persona, you're going to get caught up in always having to strive and try hard to be valued, to be recognized. You get hurt easily when somebody sees through your persona. It's humiliating. So there's no freedom in that sense with the persona. They're just vehicles for you to play different roles. And so if you're identified, then that's a problem. And I remember when I first passed my board exams in psychology, my license to practice was issued immediately. And I remember like putting on this persona, I'm a psychologist, like I just joined the club, now I'm one of you guys, It was like that, and it didn't take long before I felt that, yeah, that's kind of a prestigious title to have, but that's not really who I am. That's something I do, and nobody wants to do what they do 24 hours a day. So, you got to have a way to, take off your hat as a psychologist, put on another one, do something else, But who does that? Who makes those choices? That's the being we're talking about. And you want that to be your heart in the sense that we've been talking about it. Your absolute center of being, your core of love, your core of freedom, what never was born and never dies, that to be the center of your life. Otherwise, you get stuck in these outer identifications. Now, the persona is like the face you wear. The shadow is like its opposite behind my head, okay? Whatever's in the persona casts its opposite pole in the shadow. That's why you can't be without it. And so what's in the middle? Well, in the middle, I have the persona, I have the shadow. I have all the contents in the persona I'm doing something with. I'm identifying or I'm disidentifying. I'm using them. I'm being creative with them, or I'm not. And in the back, I don't have much control. They're up to rebellion and mischief and hijinks. And anyway, I don't want to be too aware of them because it makes me feel shame or guilty or worthless or bad. or unconfident. So I want to deny that. That's the position most people get into. So who I am then is this ego who wants to just identify with the light side and disown the dark side. And so we end up being two persons, the light side and the dark side, and we're not accountable for our dark side. And it's our dark side or our shadow side that blocks us, that gets in the way, that causes depression, insecurity, embarrassment, and so on. And in the shadow, what's in there, really? I mean, the stuff that we don't want to see, that can be wounded parts and their symptoms. But it can be instinctual parts, stuff we've inherited from our long mammalian and reptilian ancestry and on back. Stuff that's just natural and instinctive. But if we've been ignoring it, rejecting it, then it gets dense and darker and more aggressive and hostile and so on. And it can create symptoms. It can be projected. And then we dislike other people because we're hating ourselves in the shadow. We're hating that stuff. So we see it in other people. So one good way to become aware of your shadow is to ask two kinds of questions. One kind is, what kind of people can I not stand? Who do I not like? I just can't stand. And there you will find, if you're honest, there are aspects of you being projected on that person. So you're completely unable to be objective and compassionate about that person. You characterize them into your own shadow qualities, stereotype them. But then there's also gold in the shadow. The gold is the stuff that has great value for the world, but and for you, but maybe you were told that that's not nice, or that's not Christian, or nice girls don't do that, or whatever. I've known women who are brilliant artists when they finally own that, but who were taught by their fathers, look, you can't make a living with that. You need to get a degree in something that counts, something that will make money. And guys have got that same kind of message too. Anytime you deviate from the average aspiration of any society, you're going to have parents that are trying to, push you away from that. And, they're interested in your biological social survival. So they're going to push you towards things they think is best for you. And they do have a point. I don't want to discount their point. Okay. You do need to survive. You do need to be safe. You do need to have a certain level of, let's say, economic stability or well-being, or you're going to suffer greatly, But if that's all that you do, you just play it safe, you can never become what you are. You can never be free. It's hard to be creative because you're always trying to conform, to fit in, to make money, to be seen, whatever. So the gold in the shadow are these potentialities that are beautiful, and that if you had permission, you would maybe love to express them. If you could get your parts that are monitoring, oh, you can't make money with that, you can't get famous with that, whatever. If you can get past the control of those parts of you, you can bring the gold as a gift into the world, and it can mean everything. And the kind of crack-ups that shamans go through, often that's exactly the issue that's going on. They go crazy, psychotic, and they get frightened, or they get obsessed and taken over, or possessed. And traditionally, they've had to find another shaman to recognize what's going on and help them through and transform that psychotic spiritual emergency into an native destiny that the individual can own, embrace, and individuate, which means to turn it into fact, to concretely express it in the world. So if you're not owning your gold, then you're projecting your gold. onto other people. So the second question is to say, okay, who do I really admire and idealize? Now, if you ask that question, that can start to make you aware of this gold that's there latent. And I can tell you at one point in my life, it was in my early 30s. I was already a highly creative individual, but I wasn't recognizing it. I wasn't seeing it. Instead, I was totally immersed in a community of artists and supporting them and going to gallery openings. And I was interviewing them about their creativity, you know, and how they tap into it, and where do their images and ideas come from, and trying to get their reports, you know. At the same time, I was analysis, and my analyst asked me, he said, well, you know, it sounds like you're surrounding yourself with people with a strong creative genius, you know, but what about yours? It was like, hit me right between the eyes. It's like, what, me, be creative? I hadn't even thought about it, you know. And this was the guy I went to because I was having a shamanic crack up, you know. So he was naming the gold that I was not owning, but projecting and then supporting other artists. Nothing wrong with supporting other artists, but if you're here to do, or if that's what calls to you. But I was missing my calling, and that was in part to be a shamanic healer and find a way to do that. This was 40 years ago that was happening, and to find a way to do that. The world had never even heard of the word of shaman at that time. Just a few scholars were throwing that word around, but I thought, well, I can't do that. You know, who would come? Who'd want to work with me? So it came to me after a vision quest that I did that, okay, psychotherapists talk to people, and they're supposed to try to help and heal. So maybe I'll go get educated in that, not because I want to be a psychologist, but so I can do this healing work. So I was on the shamanic path before I figured out the expediency of becoming a psychologist and psychotherapist. The gold in the shadow. It's important to find that. But I also want to emphasize again, it's not important that you think calling is about your career or how you make your living. It can be, and it can be sweet if you can put your work together with your true calling, to truly be yourself and bring your gifts to the world. But a deeper understanding of calling is to realize your true nature and to help other people realize it too. I think of Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen Buddhist, who died recently, of his compassionate heart. You know, he was all about conscious breathing, so you could be centered, you could be in the heart, and then you could be a compassionate listener. And he considered this peace activism because, I mean, if you can imagine President Biden and Putin sitting down with each other, and instead of threatening each other, if you do this, I'm going to do that, you know, doing that. So that just escalates into a big fight, which is what it's done. But if you can imagine them sitting down, like Thich Nhat Hanh, you know, and saying, I see you have great suffering. Help me practice peace by understanding you completely, where your suffering is coming from. Now, imagine diplomacy like that, where, because every nation has their concerns, every leader has their concerns and their fears. It stereotypes them just to say, well, he's a capitalist, he's an autocrat, whatever. They're coming from someplace. And if you ever practice compassionate listening with another human, you will see that whatever conflict you might have had initially with them begins to dissolve, because you're really connecting now, heart to heart with that person. And so an alliance becomes possible, or a peaceful resolution instead of a violent one becomes possible. So even nations have shadows, and they war against each other because they project the darkness, the badness onto each other. I can't remember this young quote exactly, but he said something like, no tree can out and reach the heavens with its branches if it can't grow its roots into hell. And I think it was his invitation to say we need to tend, not just aspire towards the light and the celestial, but we need to grow our roots down, but we need to grow them consciously with awareness, and be rooted in both sides, both polarities, the opposite, so we can hold them together. And to do that, you need a consciousness in either one, transcendent to either position. And you could call that greater consciousness the infinite, the Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, Hatun, Shiva, Shiva Shakti, whatever you want to call this greater consciousness. These are just names for the space that you want to find and enter, that fifth element that Brian was talking about. And the Quechua shamans call that Ushai, which means essence, literally. It's your essence. While it's uniquely patterned in everybody, there's nothing that doesn't have it. And there is, throughout all the unique essences in the cosmos, one super essence, the Ushai of Ushais, and that is Hatun. And each individual essence is just a unique expression of that. And that all resides in the heart. And so if you can open and relax into that, it underlies all your parts. It runs through them as their ground of being. It runs through their heart. Each part has a center. Okay, so if the parts can relax their position and their kind of conflictual attitude towards each other, they can experience this transcendent, uniting and healing consciousness that can honor both parts and bring together in one. Jung called that wholeness. And he liked the alchemical epithet conjunctio oppositorum, the union of the opposites. Excuse me. The idea that we have parts is rooted in Paleolithic shamanism going back a good 50,000 years. And the history of healing in the Western civilization that's been tracked from the Middle East, the Mediterranean area, has shamanism at its roots. And it morphs into temple healing, it morphs into czar dancing, it morphs into exorcistic healing, it morphs into mesmerism, it morphs into alchemy, it morphs into hypnosis. And by the 19th century in France, it's morphed into dissociative psychology or dipsychism and multiple personality. And Charcot and Jean-Claude Charcot and Pierre Genet at the Salpêtrière Hôpital, the hospital in Paris, became students of these two men. And they carried forward this tradition of the soul with its multiplicity of parts, and gave it modern depth psychological language, archetypes, complexes, instincts, and so on. But it is the same stuff the ancient shamans were dealing with, just a different language. The idea that our psyches are a unity is just utter nonsense. There's no ground for it whatsoever. And there's no history for it either. But especially since the development of monotheistic theology, especially in the Middle Ages, and then the development of Enlightenment, rational ego psychology, we end up thinking of ourselves as just one, when actually the only thing that's one is this deep heart that's it, and not our parts. Those are like all the tubes on a flute or a pipe organ that the air of spirit blows through to create the beautiful music. So we all have those pipes, and the spirit moving through us wants to create beautiful, harmonious music through them. That's the idea. And so once we realize that we're not sick because we have parts. Multiplicity is not a personality disorder. You can be so dissociated and in conflict with your parts that you get multiple personality or dissociative identity disorder, they call it today. But this is simply a person with normal multiplicity, but they've got a few juicy parts that are unconscious of each other, and they're creating a lot of havoc in their lives. And they too can be cared for and healed and brought into a harmonious symphony with proper care and help from a therapy that has a shamanic kind of depth to it, a psycho-shamanic depth. Another point I want to make is about leadership. You know, if we're a multiplicity, then who's leading? And the answer is usually there's a few parts that are so tuned into survival, comfort, safety, social adaptation. They're running the show, and that's called the ego. And Jung at one point defined the ego as a complex. He would hyphenate it, the ego complex, because he knew it was a multiplicity working together. It's not one thing. In IFS, internal family systems, they call the ego a complex of managers. And that's instructive because managers, what do? They manage your life. And managers cannot help you heal. They cannot help you become whole. The ego can't do that either. So you do need an aware I, but that aware I can't be the parts. That's where it gets tricky. Because the managers want to act like they know what they're doing. And they can even take what I'm saying and hijack it and use it for their own agendas. So you have to know how to open your heart and connect with that infinite awareness and intelligence that is so big, you can look at all your parts, including those managers that are trying to hijack it. And it can get curious and help them to relax just by asking questions. And when it does that, the spirit, the awareness in you, capital A, becomes a leader. And we want a self-led psychological system, a self-led soul. And that means we're using those 8 C words that we displayed a week or two ago when we talked about compassion and curiosity and creativity and courage and confidence and clarity and connectivity. Those are how best you can describe the power of the awareness of the heart, the power of the heart's energies. Okay, I think I'll pause there before I go to part 2 of this talk, which looks more concretely at how we can recognize and work with these parts in ourselves. But let's see if we have some questions at this point.
Okay, if you'd like to ask a question of Michael, you can raise your hand by clicking on the reactions button. You'll see that option there. Nothing's come through in the chat, Michael. I think everyone's just been rapt. I mean, it's been very clear and just following along. Okay, let's go to Forrest first. You got your hand raised. Forrest, could you unmute?
Sorry. This is more anecdotal, Michaela. Back in 2013, I had what was probably referred to as a sudden Kundalini awakening, where I would spontaneously just laugh hysterically, then immediately just cry uncontrollably. And that went back and forth and several times for over a course of an hour or so. But during that episode, I was prompted to say the word love. And so when I was prompted to say that, I just, used a very simple sentence and said, I love whatever. And before I could get to the, speak the word love, I would just break out into hysterical laughter. And then I said, I'd try it again. And I said, I would just say it internally and not speak it aloud. And again, the same thing happened. So from that point forward, when I hear the word love, I equate that to truth, all capitals, and love being all capitals, and not having a human, I guess, influence on that. So I've struggled since then to come up with a definition, if you will, of what love, all capitals, really means. So that was just an anecdotal thing. And so when you mention love, and I understand you're doing it from the human experience, that I just now have taken on a whole different perspective and put that in a different context than what I would have prior to that episode.
Wow, that's a fantastic anecdote. Allows me to pull something else out here that might be of interest. So you mentioned the Kundalini awakening. That's a form of spiritual emergence that can become an emergency for many people. A spiritual emergency can be a rapid psychic awakening, a spontaneous shamanic crisis that looks manic or it looks psychotic. It can take a TUKUY form. It can be triggered by hot, intimate sexuality. It can be triggered by meditation, by psychedelics, and so on. And there are many, many forms. But essentially, something's trying to emerge. In the Kundalini instance, you're talking about, if we connect this with parts, just take the 7 chakras that we're all so familiar with. Each one of these is a psycho-spiritual energy center that has a specific vibration and point of view around which parts or subpersonalities can cluster so that they have a point of view. Okay, let's say that chakra, the 3rd chakra, kind of a power and social leveraging energy would be strong, and somebody had strong managers that wanted to be politically powerful or economically powerful, this sort of thing, or parts that reduce things to just material means and ends, and so on. Heart chakra, you get something completely different. Throat chakra. So any kind of blockage in any of these keeps parts of you offline and from fully achieving their destiny. And they can be wounded parts. They can be parts that are just conditioned to stay in that chakra level. So when the chakras are like clogged or you're stuck at a level, the that divine energy you were talking about, that Kundalini energy, begins to arise and try to undo that locked upness of the chakras. And as it comes through, there's a tremendous release of energy, and yes, love and sexuality can be very strong, with the root chakra and so forth, the genital chakra, and can keep coming up, and the chakras can play off of each other, which means parts are playing off of each other too. So the laughing, the crying, some people have shabd, the sounds, they're hearing stuff all the time and they can't turn it off. And in fact, you can actually go psychotic with this if you don't have somebody to help you with this energy, you can go crazy. And I help people learn to breathe, actually through the chakras in their feet, bringing it right up through all the 7 chakras, right out the crown and back into the Pachamama, back into the, so that energy has an exit, but can be recycled. And you're not clinging, you're not holding on, you're letting the flow happen. But it's a tremendously powerful process. My point being that parts tend to cluster around chakras. And a lot of people coming with a shamanic crisis, it's either kind of the visual hallucinatory, which is what mine was, just seeing spirits and seeing my own daimon and animals everywhere, in another dimension. And I thought other people could see them and they couldn't. And then I realized it was hallucinatory in its intensity. What do I do with this? I can't be driving a car and having this go on. So that's one type of shamanic crisis, but the Kundalini is another form that I see. And it can be stimulated by using entheogens, by the way, because the spirit doesn't care. It's just trying to wake you. It's just trying to do its job. So if you're inviting that in, it can come. But if you don't have the right kind of containment and you don't have a master with you that can help you channel that, you can end up in the hospital for a long stay and on powerful antipsychotics and mood medications that further suppress and do you damage. Yeah. So thank you so much for that opportunity to share.
Thanks, McCall. Just one follow-up, just what prompted that whole episode. Again, that was back in 07. I said 38, it was 07. My immediate next door neighbor was a rabbi, Judith. She's from Australia, and she decided she wanted to become an ordained rabbi. And so what prompted that whole episode was that I was having a mini mental meltdown one day, and I went next door to, unload some baggage, which I did. And I happened to leave my reading glasses at her house, which is immediately next door. And I came back to my house, just do some work on the computer, and discovered I didn't have my glasses. So I walked back to get them, coming back, and then started my work again. That's when this whole episode got triggered. And I thought to myself, and very sarcastically, I went back over to Judith's house and said, "Hey, you did something to my glasses, didn't you?" And she said, "Yes." She said a prayer. I never asked her what the prayer was, but then I came back, and that's when this whole sudden Kundalini awakening experience just exploded. So that's what triggered it.
Yes, thank you. It couldn't trigger it if there wasn't a preparedness for it at some level.
Yeah, I think I was receptive to that. I mean, it wasn't, so apparently, unbeknownst to me, I guess I was ready.
Yeah. Got it. So there are many forms of suffering that actually are very similar to what we're discussing. Our guardian spirit is trying to help us remember who we are and what our path is, or our destiny is to fulfill in this life. And if we're not listening, it's forced to louder, to scream, So at first it might come through urges and invitations attracting us to this or that. and shunning this or that, so that we lock in on something it thinks will help us fulfill or wake up and become what we're meant to be. But if we don't do that, then we're likely to have stronger emotional symptoms come, and eventually painful symptoms. And if still we don't seek what's going on there and where this is coming from, we can get very sick, and we can even die. So that whole pathway, the Kundalini awakening, can be resolved, but it can get worse without a proper container and understanding. All of these forms of spiritual emergency require a larger cartography, a larger philosophy, such as I'm partially trying to offer in this little seminar we're doing. But if you don't have a larger perspective, you don't have a good container, and you start to think you're going crazy, or you start to think this is hopeless, I can't do anything about it, because you have no way to understand it and to see what the possibilities are for you. Well, that's an important point. Parts. So I'm going to come back to that. I wonder if anybody else has questions about what I've said this far.
We've got some more here. So Finn, you've got your hand raised. Can you unmute and ask?
Thank you very much for this. This is all, well, everything, including what's to come, is all wonderful. I feel very, very fertile right now. One of the expressions I had amongst some friends, as I had various, I don't know, things that I guess I wouldn't have considered habitually happening to me, is I would question, say, is this good crazy or bad crazy? If it's good crazy, I'm all in. If it's bad crazy, I'll look at it and hopefully I figure it out so that I'm aware of it the next time it comes around. And in searching for good crazy, I've had several instances where something has overcome me. And what I've done is I've just let it happen. And I've even kind of intentionally fueled it because I wished to be able to moderate its intensity. Because I felt that that was an important thing in my capacity of awareness. And one of the times happened while I was driving. And then I realized, this is not good. You should stop your car. So then I stopped my car. And then I just had a complete meltdown. And, I felt much better afterwards. So my question is, after we've done this workshop and I've re-listened to it, I'm very interested in coming up with approaches to deepening my awareness and living as a better being within this cosmos. So hopefully, taking this and other things, I can continue to pursue a more integrated good crazy, if that's such a label.
Okay, thank you, Finn. Also really great input from you. Yeah, so back to spiritual emergency again. So you see there's a good kind of crazy and a bad kind of crazy. Yeah. So, the old word for this was madness. Madness would be bad crazy, Divine madness was something else, however. But the thing of it, the word mad, how did that get to characterize these states where we are breaking through barriers and collapsing old frameworks, and to other people looking totally nuts, but it actually feels good because we're so free. Yeah. I think all forms of madness, well, most forms of madness, I recognize you can have tumors and things like that you can cause psychotic states, but without some type of organic pathology causing the state, the word madness suggests that we are mad. There's an anger when we're coming out of the boxes we've been stuffed into and conditioned to stay in. There's a pleasure and joy, and is like, fuck this, fuck that. This is how it is for me. This is what I see. It may be ungrounded, but there's a certain joy and exuberance in just getting out of the box. And that's precisely what can get you put on the antipsychotics and locked up in the hospital. That's their thing, you know, because your family doesn't have a cartography. They don't have a framework for it. That's just crazy. So let's get the psychiatrist, or let's take him to the hospital. And if it were met with a more supportive environment, that could be a transformative experience. Shamanic and other mystical forms of death, rebirth, initiation also involve divine madness, you know, and Socrates, you know, Plato's teacher, you know, this guy, you know, his eyes were fluttering. He was out in the streets half the day sometimes. He downloads from the gods, you know, which then he would bring that insight and wisdom into dialogues or conversations with Plato. So that whole opening to physical wisdom passed through a kind of divine mad state for Socrates. And that has shamanic origins. And the drumming technique became one way to intentionally provoke that. So you could have some control, not just be totally taken over by the state. But you mentioned something that's very important, you know, and it has to do with grounding. And that's like calming yourself down, getting it to manageable levels so you can function, not be a danger to yourself or anyone else. So this has been one of my areas of specialty. And when I'm working in Europe, at times before my retreat or workshop, I have a little gathering of people. Sometimes it's quite large, to come for me to assess them, whether they're misdiagnosed, and whether they can participate safely in my workshops, because I like to know who's coming, you know, and if you're on powerful medications, you know, cardiovascular, neuroleptics, whatever, I want to know about it and see what's going on so I can determine if it's safe for you. You know, if you got bipolar disorder, special provisions have to be put in place to make it safe for you, and your family has to be involved. There has to be a support system in case it doesn't work so well. And so I assess people in terms of what's going on, and 99% of the time they're people misdiagnosed. They're having a spiritual emergency and they knew it, or they wouldn't find their way to me in the first place. And they end up being able to come to the workshop and actually have the initiatory experience they've been seeking, without a total destructive psychotic episode going on. So the thing I always advise people that have had the bipolar or the manic episode, okay, or are having lots of psychedelic states, is to ease up on the meditation, ease up on the spiritual practices. You don't have to do it 24/7. You don't have to be doing it obsessively, because they continue to alter your consciousness. They can really, you know, you need your mind, you know, and they can kind of knock it offline. And so everything subconscious starts coming up. So tone it down a bit. Know when you need to do that. Okay. To be spiritual doesn't mean you have to meditate all the time. You know, you can practice compassion. You can practice being present, like put your hands in the soil, weed your garden, you know, chop some wood, make pottery, get in the earth element. And this is important, since that's the theme element-wise today, is the power of the earth element. You know, it can actually suck wild, distracting energy out and calm you down and get you into a centered state. So that's a point. And then, okay, so if you're having psychotic level overload, you know, with too much creativity, too many visions, whatever, ease up on the vegetarianism. Okay, it raises the vibration, so it's going to continue to pull you into that. So this is where you need protein, and if you're not a meat eater, get good vegetable protein. Let's say get a jar of peanut butter, good peanut butter, not the stuff with honey and God knows what in it, but just crushed nuts that have been made into a butter, and help your body ground you. Because you need the grounding kind of nourishment right now, the transcendental kind of nourishment. The whole point of spirit is to be able to live it in your body, in this world, in this society, and do something creative with it that benefits others and the whole planet. So,
thank you.
Thank you for that opportunity to bring that out.
Yeah, that's it. It's great that you mentioned food, Michael. It's so true. A lot of these ashram diets, vegetarianism, and that can keep people in really elevated state. I was working with some Brazilian elders in the Santo Daime tradition. So they work with ayahuasca's sacrament. And it shocked everyone when they came up here to visit and do some ceremonies that what they wanted to do after the ceremony was go up for hamburgers and French fries. And I think that's really what was going on, is they're looking to reground in the body and the earth element. In yoga, we call it tamasic energy, so that more heavy, grounded energy. It's not so much about going out and doing, but about centering down and holding.
Yeah. Appreciate that input too.
And it's interesting. I've been researching the shamanic roots of Western culture, and you mentioned Socrates and talking about madness. I was just reading about the divine madness last night, coincidentally.
Huh.
And it's really interesting because Socrates, he described 4 types of divine madness. So the theomania. So like love, they had a more broader and discrete understanding of what we think of as love, but also with mania. So one is the prophetic frenzy of the Oracle of Delphi and the priestesses. We called this the gift of Apollo. The other was mystical revelations and initiations, which provide a way of release for those in need, which he considered the gift of Dionysus. Poetic inspiration, which he considered the gift of the muses, and the madness of lovers, which he thought of as the gift of Aphrodite and Eros. So these different types of divine madness, and yeah, it's great. It just really helps clarify things and differentiate.
Yeah, right. I've read Plato in the Greek, and as my father was a Greek professor, and I took his class and learned how to do it. And Plato's got like 4 words for love. There's epithymia, which is a sensual, organic love. There's philia, which is a friendship, like we're trying to connect with the elements, have a friendship with the elements. It's equals coming together. Okay. We could throw the Latin libido in for epithymia, by the way, the sexual libido. But so friendship, and Plato saw that as a higher level or a more expansive level than just a pure physical love. And then eros, which overcomes separation. It draws together, and it can be a philosophical eros, an eros for the archetypes, the ideas, the divine itself, which it perceives Plato's concept of divinity, which is the form of the good, or the archetype of all archetypes, if you will. Yeah. And then there's agapao or agape, which is like the Buddhist compassion. It's a limitless, self-transcending, unconditioned embrace of everything. Yeah. Greek is especially rich and you've got like something like 100 words in Sanskrit that bring out nuances of love. English has got 1. So what do we mean when we're talking about love? In this course, I'm talking partly about that eros of Plato, but also the compassion, which I see as the depth of love. The eros is like everything in creation is trying to connect with everything else. Everything wants to be back in unity or in some meaningful relationship. So there's this urge, this deep desire to be connected. So eros is the drive to overcome separation. Agape recognizes the fundamental unity of everything in the first place, and so that nobody has a basis for judgment or superiority. We're all one, just together. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, Caleb, you've posted a number of questions in the chat, but I see you've got your hand raised, so let's just do it live and in person. Are you there? We can't hear you. Caleb, we can't hear you. I'm not sure what's going on your end. Can't see you or hear you.
Oh, Caleb. Is it Caleb with a K?
Yeah.
I know Caleb. Yeah. All right.
Okay, Caleb, I'm going to ask, maybe you have a look at your connections, and I'm going to go on to Carmen for the time being. So Carmen, if you could unmute and ask your question.
Okay,
share.
thank you. I was thinking if, or I wanted to ask if you can see dreams as a path for spiritual emergence. And then if so, how can we approach them? And especially with nightmares, because I believe that, or I think that maybe nightmares can become a way of madness while we are asleep. So I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Yes, I have a whole course on that subject. I will try to be very brief because I don't want to go too far from our topic. But let me say, there are ways of working with dreams that are inherently psychospiritual. And you don't have to view everything in a dream as some part of yourself or even some part of the shadow, because consciousness is open to a space that transcends the human. And when you die, you're leaving your body and you're going somewhere else, and there's still some form of consciousness, still imagery and emotional states and what have you that you're in touch with. And you can connect with others. So these kind of dimensions of reality can permeate the dream life. And ultimately, the dream maker, you can think of it as your guardian spirit, or you can just think of the divine as a daimon who's trying to help you become whole, who's trying to compensate and balance out your imbalances, where it brings up one opposite pole when you're denying it. That can be a nightmare. That can be very disturbing, But the thing is, from a psycho-shamanic perspective, how can we work with that as part of a spiritual path? And I teach people, I help them lay out a geography, like a shaman's cosmos with a lower world, upper world, middle. And in the lower world, we create a safe place sometimes. And then we create a house of dreams. Jung had a house of dreams, you might say, when he imagined himself on the top floor of a house. It was like in the time he was living, and he went down, and then it was like the 1600s, and he went down another floor, and it was like from Roman times. And then he goes down, pulls up a ring and goes down steps to a cellar, and there's skulls on the ground. And he realized that was like a Paleolithic era, something very archaic. And he realized the whole dream was like a picture of the collective unconscious of its different layers or depths, So we can create a house like that using our imagination and install it in the underworld. But this can be a more fun house than Jung's. It can have paintings on the walls that have living figures in them, like in Harry Potter, action is happening. In mine, I've got a mirror hanging on a hallway. And on one side of the hallway is a bunch of doors. to other cultures, other civilizations, and other times. At the end of the hall, there's my dream kitchen. So when I have a nightmare or a dream that really upset me and it didn't seem complete, I'll get my one of my shamanic guides, that's a powerful protector, power animal, you might call it. And we go down that hallway together, and I go into that room. When I open the door, I'm stepping back into the dream. When I'm in the dream, I can ask the monster, or the evil figure, the problematic character, why are you here? What is it you want? And let the dream go over it. And I don't know if I mentioned last time, I think I might have that I once discovered a frog in the dream kitchen, in darkness. And I ended up cleaning the kitchen up and redecorating it. And then the frog transformed into this beautiful rainbow. So it was no longer a threatening dream, but it was some message about me taking care of things at a time when I was too busy and some things weren't getting taken care of. So I was being guided from a superior consciousness, superior level of awareness, permeating my dream and helping me get curious about that so I could go back into the dream and dream the dream forward actively and find a way to resolve it. So I had more fruit in my life because I had to make some changes in order to honor that dream. So that's one way of using dream work as a psycho-spiritual path. And I see the shamanic journey, using the drum, that kind of journey into the other world. That's a form of acting dreaming. You're creating the dream state, but in a way that you can remain lucid in it and move about. It's not much different from lucid dreaming between waking and sleep states. So you can use the kind of consciousness that comes to you in dreaming, or the dream time, to learn about yourself, to heal things, to make transformations that you need to make. I don't know, is that helpful or not?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Carmen. Okay, Caleb, let's give it another try here.
It's not lighting up. It's too bad. So
Yeah,
here,
well,
Caleb,
he's got a question in the chat here, so let's just go to that.
okay.
So he's been asking about the, okay, where does it begin? He asks, what do you feel is the role of solitude in calming one's nervous system to increase sensitivity in order to perceive subtle ranges of nature, such as spiritual guides, ancestors, helpers, etc.?
Okay, thank you, Caleb, for your question. It seems like it's a big one. I will do my best in a brief period of time here. I think if you can't find solitude, you can't find peace. It's hard to have the awareness that you need to really connect with something. So space of solitude within yourself can be happened even in a room full of people, just by you sitting and you breathing, going inside a bit, even hold some level of connection with the outer world while you do that. Or you can just go deeper. Certainly being alone on a lake, on a forest, in a park, walking down a road, that kind of solitude, or being alone in your study. I think not much of my life's work would have come into being without all those kinds of solitude. I see that as a kind of yoga, it's a time for going within. We are polar in our relationship to the world. So we have a public side that has to engage the world. We have the other pole, the private side, which we need to connect with. And they're inherently related. And they're not enemies of each other, but we need a kind of balance that works for us, a fluidity between them. Introverts, intuitive introverts, they're going to be much more wanting solitude. And sensation extroverts, they're going to want to be with people or out there working with things in the shop or something tangible, tactile. So the accent can be on one or the other, but basically you need both. So to be whole and to be healthy, because we're made in this way.
Yeah, great. Aurora has posted a question that is related. She asks, she says, you told us about solitude and loneliness as protections and love barriers. Does it mean that the true love nature of human beings is not being alone? Do you understand what she's asking here?
Yeah, solitude is different from being solitary. There's some people that just don't want to deal with the world, so they retreat from it. I'm on my own. I don't need you. I don't need to trust in you. That's what I was talking about. That's not really solitude. Okay, that's isolating oneself from the world. In solitude, you can gather the whole world up into your solitude and love it, contemplate it, care for it, write about it. There's all kinds of things you can place. Or when you're out of solitude, you have a program of action that was birthed in the solitude, and you can take that back into the world. I forget the rest of your question, though.
I think that answers it. Yeah, I think it's looking at the difference between kind of a conscious solitude and that retreat from the world as a defense or avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you think about this, the last part of it, the true love nature of the human being? Is it to be alone or to be with others? What do you think about that?
Okay, there's a implied dualism in the question, and we all carry this dualism, that it's either me, myself, or it's the other. So which way I should go, or what's the balance? But we're each the product of our ancestors. We're each a product of the bacteria, the blue-green algae of the oceans, going back a couple billion years ago. We're each ancestors, or the stars are our ancestors, because all the elements in our body are made out of super exploding stars. And then we have historical ancestors and more recent, so we couldn't even be here without the others that made that possible. And likewise, we're touching on each other that's on this now and on the future. Thich Nhat Hanh again made this point a lot, just the paper he said I'm writing on, that was a tree. But then there was a lumberjack, there were trucks, people that imported fuel to power the trucks. There were marketers and managers, store owners involved, getting that paper to me in a form that I can write these words. So we're each subjects and objects. We're not one or the other. We're subject object. That is, we're something for ourselves and something for others. And there's no clear separation. But we live as if we are disconnected. We live in a disconnected manner where we're not acknowledging the very fact that we're all woven together. And I think compassion is resting on the fact that we're all woven together and there's no absolute separation.
Yeah, that's great. I think relating to Aurora's question, that if we're connected to our true nature, we never feel alone, actually.
Okay, so parts. Now let's think about our own parts. Whatever we identify as, that can be considered a self that we identify with. Hal and Cedra Stone called that a primary self because it's the one you first think of. And so the opposite of that, the opposite polarity, is disowned. You don't include that in your self-definition, your self-identity. Why? Because the parts that are primary for you are the ones that help you survive, help you be safe, help you fit in, help you succeed in the social order. They're not interested in the other half. Okay. And they need to be advised there's value in the other half. you know. So the opposite of a strong pusher self or a strong achiever can be a lazy self or a person that's just into being, not doing things, you know. And I have that polar struggle in myself sometimes, you know, where I can get so ambitious, I'm working all the time and not taking enough time to just be. And then when I do take enough time to be, it feels so good. I'm thinking, why would I want to go back into that rat race and struggle so hard to do something? But wholeness means I hold attention. I don't allow either part to determine my course of action. I allow my awareness to do that, and my free will, which is my yes and my no. And that comes from the centered place of the heart. So you can have a pleaser part, and its opposite would be a truth teller. It's going to say it no matter what, even if it pisses people off. You can have a rational part and an intuitive part. The rational part, everything's got to be logical, but its intuitive opposite doesn't know where it gets information, you know. And if it's rejected, then it's judged and looked down on as something primitive. You can identify with being a peacemaker. And when you do that, the tendency is to lose sight of the fighter in you, or the person who picks fights or argues a lot or whatever. So the fighter is in your shadow, you know. You can be a perfectionist, okay, but I guarantee you there's someplace you're not perfectionistic. And where is that, you know? I used to have a large counseling center, and I had a therapist that was super perfectionistic, you know. His house, his boat, his cars, there was not a dust anywhere to be found. But step into his consulting room, oh my God, there were stacks of papers on the floor, stacks of books. He didn't attend to his aesthetics. That's where he liked to work, in that mess, you know. But that was not part of his identity. He didn't even like it that he did that. Okay, he identified himself as really having his shit together and everything is beautiful. But there was one place people couldn't see that. And he had other places in his life that were kind of messy, more emotionally messy. Of course, you didn't want anybody to see that, but it's there. It's interacting. Just because you have something in your shadow doesn't mean it's not doing its thing. Guarantee it's doing its thing somewhere and causing some mischief. So you can think of yourself as loving. Okay, isn't that nice? You know, but it's important to ask, where are you not loving? You know, or you identify as a mother. Now that's a role, but okay, so there's some women that identify. That's why I'm here. You know, big mother energy. Fine. Okay. So where in you do you not give a damn about being a mother? Now, maybe you don't know about that part, but I'll bet you your kids do. So I hope you're getting a sense that whatever you identify with, this is me, like I'm responsible. Well, where is my irresponsibility then? And can I be courageous enough and big-hearted enough to acknowledge that I'm irresponsible and I'm accountable for that? We usually want to do with that. That's humiliating. That says there's something wrong with me. Well, what's wrong with something me wrong with you? We all got stuff wrong with us. It's part of life, you know. And you can do something about it only if you're aware of it. And you don't disown it. So my challenge to you is to take a minute. We'll just give you a minute here to write down 3 words that describe what you identify as yourself. Would you do that? Write down on paper, if you can, 3 words that you identify with as you. And then on the other half of the paper, write 3 opposite words, one for each of those. Now, if you've got that, let's just look at what you put on the disown list. And maybe circle one of those. Maybe it's one you think you might need to pay the most attention to. And the thing is to get compassionate and curious with that part. That is, don't have a point of view towards it. Come from your center. And just ask it to tell you the truth. Like that part should say to you, this is how I am. This is what I do. Because. And see if you can pull a sentence out of that. No. If you're able to circle that and maybe make a statement, a sentence about it, that's fantastic. If not, you can do it later when you've had more time. But the thing is to just begin working with that one part. And to hear its point of view, to see if you can find some way it has a right to be, to exist, to coexist with you. We all interexist. So is there room in your heart for that part? You don't have to agree with it, but can you radically accept it without conditions? This is part of me, part of my inner life. And then we'll hold that there for a minute. I want to play a video, but I want to introduce it by saying this. So let's say you identified as responsible, that's your primary self. So you disowned your irresponsible part. Now, I can think of value in an irresponsible part, okay? It gives you some freedom. It allows you downtime. It allows you to relax. It allows you to push beyond the boundary you've boxed yourself into or something like that. Maybe it needs to find a more creative way to do that that causes no harm, but it has a right to be. And to see that, and to also see the value of your primary self, the responsible part. You need a consciousness bigger than both. So open your heart, allow yourself to see both, the value of both, and to explain to both why the other has a right to be there and exist. And what you, as this centered awareness, recommend as a way to bring them together in a conscious relationship instead of an unconscious one. Now, there's a practice I've done all over the world. It's called angel whispering. I wish it had got called daimonic listening or garden spirit whispering, but essentially somebody saw what I was doing and said, "Oh, you're doing angel whispering." But an angel is a Catholic word for a daimon, a guardian angel. I think guardian spirit, but this practice, you see people with their arms outstretched. These are like wings of an angel or wings of your guardian spirit if it's a bird form. Could be the wings of a loving human form too. But that entity, the guardian spirit or the angel, represents your highest self. So it is this aware, compassionate presence. And in the video, you will see one person standing and one person sitting. The one standing has their wings or arms outstretched, often enfolding in love. And it's whispering from its compassionate place that the part sitting in the chair needs to hear. And everybody does this 2 times. Once they're sitting down and their human partner has been instructed in what to say, what to whisper that they need to hear. And so they get the experience of receiving it like a wounded child part needing to hear the blessing and the love of the guardian spirit, and vice versa. So everybody does it twice. So if I could illustrate this particular ceremony requires a little preparation, which I'm trying to help you with now, because you can do this alone, just you, and you can put a pillow on a chair to represent the part that you're working with. But in a workshop, we have enough people, they can do it for each other. And so I want to play it through, comment about it, and then maybe we'll play it through again. It has the music of Johann Pachelbel, Canon in D, because there's something about this music that helps get people in the needed flow state to do this. So Brian, if you could bring it in. So in that video, people are often weeping, or some will burst into spontaneous joy, like Forrest was talking about too, and laugh, this sort of thing. Some of these have been done inside, some outside. That was in Belgium at the end of a retreat. Sometimes we'll start a retreat that way, but it can be extremely powerful. And the idea for it came when I once was just blessing a young woman on her shamanic path in front of the community here in Michigan. That was Belgium, but in Michigan. And it was so powerful for me just to wrap my arms around her as she sat in front of me, and bless her, that people began weeping and were deeply touched by what was going on. And I thought, wow, I wonder if there's a way to further help people with this type of blessing. What is, they bring their own guardian spirit into play and have it actively seek to help them heal the split in their psyche between these opposites and bring them together and say words of blessing. And that's been a powerful ceremony. And so we've done it everywhere. It's a great way to end the workshop with people feeling a deep connection for some part of themselves they've been rejecting. And we get into trauma work with, that's another workshop, the capacity to reach out like that from a place of infinite awareness and compassion. We can heal ourselves. We can recover our own souls, and we can teach clients to do that. We need to do it first for ourselves. We have the power to do that, and we don't need someone else to do it for us. So, what you can do at home is, when you're ready, set up a chair in a room. Maybe you could do that this week. And in the chair, you could have your spouse, your child sit in for you, and you first just start off being the guardian angel or guardian spirit, and you're raining down love, compassion, and your person sitting in for you, your wounds. You whisper wonderful things that you know are true into their ear. And then you switch around, have the person in the chair who will then remember what you said, say it back to you once you are back to being your ordinary self, and receive and take in the blessing, the love, the clarity that comes that way. And if you will do that in this next week, and you can get back to the page once they publish, Brian will publish this recorded video, there's a place for comments, and you could report in sharing your experience. It could be beautiful if you were up for that, for us to know how that was for you and for others to be able to share. So consider that. So it can be a beautiful way to wrap up this particular series that we've done. So I would like to go back and view it one more time, maybe not the whole thing, Brian, maybe half of it, but just so we can see the relationship again. You will notice some people in the guardian spirit role are whispering, others are just holding space because that's what that person wanted. They wanted to sit in that love field. What I like most is that there's a lot of medical doctors there. There's a ballerina, there's a number of therapists, there's a lawyer, and some shamanic students. So it makes for a nice consciousness expanding event for people that normally would not go there. Okay, I think that's good. Okay, so I want to take questions on that practice.
Michael, what if you don't have someone else to practice it with this week? Is there a way to do it on your own?
Yes, I've done it on my own, and I really like it. So you can just put a big pillow, maybe from off your sofa or something, in a smaller chair, and maybe put a sweater on it and a hat or something to stand in for you, And you can do that part where put the music on. You can download this music, multiple sources on YouTube or Spotify or something. Just put the Canon in D from Pachelbel on, and just smudge down, light a candle, and then sink into it, and maybe do that a couple times. And a beautiful way to reverse the role is if you're recording yourself while you're being the angel or guardian spirit, so that you have the words. And then when you sit down in the chair to be the part receiving those words, you play the recording so you can take them in.
Got a question here. This practice is bringing up grief for some people, and any suggestions on how to deal with overwhelming feelings of grief?
Breathe. Conscious, compassionate breathing, which is like this. On the in-breath. First your lips on the out-breath and smile. And then if tears want to come, that's fine. Breath can actually release more grief. Grief needs to flow. It's a water element and it's a breath element. So to move the water, sometimes you need the breath, but the breath can also help you stay centered so that you're in your central axis. You're in the heart center, and you can just witness and feel and express whatever needs to come out. Grief is the most normal feeling because every moment of our life is perishing into the next. We only have now, but what we've lost in the past is often the occasion for grief. It's painful. And we've all lost loved ones. We've all had parts of ourselves that didn't get to develop or that were injured. We may have grief about that as we recognize that. So journaling is also important. I think it's important to smudge, have some type of cedar, sage, sweetgrass, Palo Santo, or some incense that you like. Copal is really nice for healing. That Mexican sap that you can get, and I think you can order it just about anywhere in the world, and smoke. And that the way you associate this holy smoke with the healing that's going on, and be gentle, be radically accepting of whatever comes, even if it's the most painful grief. It's a beautiful healing.
Yeah. And if I could add to that too, just building on what you're saying about the breath and grief being connected to the water element and movement being necessary, what I find is a lot of people get locked up in their diaphragm. And to me, the diaphragm is like the seat of the soul, and it moves like a parachute, jumping up and down when we laugh, when we sob, and when we orgasm. And so just encourage people to sob from the belly, not be so contained, but to really let that grief move through you. I find it very helpful.
I like it. Thank you for that. That's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, that song, someone else is making a comment about Pachelbel's Canon in D minor. I mean, I played that at a young woman's funeral. She went to my high school and she was murdered. And so every time I hear that song, gosh, it brings up so much grief for me. Okay, well, all is silent on this front now, Michael.
Okay. So let me see if I can tie some things together. So this whole course has been about connecting. Started with the elements, and we continue to connect with the elements. Today is the Earth Element Day. And, you can do a ceremony like that. All four of the elements are in there. We've got the water of grief flowing. We've got the wind of breath flowing. We've got the fire element. I don't know if you saw the fire in there, but it was there. And it can be in the passions too. And we have the beautiful setting, the earth element there. And I think of the earth element eating and eliminating come to mind because it was something my teacher stressed, to eat a meal in silence, just savor it, and no conversation, no thinking about things in future or past, just the focus is presence on the food. And then eating with joy so that you're expressing gratitude as you eat. And last week we did the water element, the ceremony of bathing. We can add to the eating element, elimination when you go to the bathroom, to consider that as a ceremony too. The ceremony of eating, the ceremony of bathing, but the ceremony of elimination is to become aware as you're breathing, as you're releasing, that you're offering a gift from the nourishment that you got that you don't need back to Mother Earth, where it will be recycled. And just be aware of that interdependency. We all interexist, even our poop interexists with the earth. And so to open your awareness to include all that you are, coming in and going out, just like the in breath and the out breath. It's all part of life. And in this way, you can be at peace with life. You can nourish yourself better. You can eliminate better. You can better. But we move from the elements into more symbolic and interior meanings in the course of this course, to connecting with our own deep center, to connecting with our parts, connecting with one another. It's all about connections. The TUKUY, which is the title of the course, the greeting. And there's a chant, I think Brian will attach it. It's the Yokanji One Kausaya chant. I think I sent that to you at some point in there, right? Yeah. So that's a chant, Yokanji One Kausaya. This may cut out, but I'll try to give you a sense of the rhythm. This is great when you can play the drum loud, which I can't do here, but. Can you hear that? Oh, Yokanji One Kausaya, Yokanji One Kausaya, Yokanji One Kausaya, Yokanji One Kausaya. Oh, oh, oh. Tukuy Shinguan, Kuyani Miki Kinda, Tukuy Shinguan, Kuyani Miki Kinda, Kuyani Miki Kinda. Kuyani Miki Kinda. So it's unconditional love. So you're welcoming the life force, the Kausai, which comes out of the earth itself. We are every creature on this planet is made of the earth, made of Ashpamama, made of Pachamama. And we wouldn't be here otherwise. It's the oldest earthly ancestor. And it comes up to the soil and it runs through our veins one way or another. And every cell in our body is made of it. And so we are each Mother Earth walking. We're each Pachamama walking, talking, breathing, inquiring together, studying, loving, healing, crying, grieving, all Pachamama, all the Great Spirit, all love wanting to express itself. And that is the basis of shamanic healing from the Quechua point of view, but also you can find just variations on the language, but the same reality all over, not just the indigenous world, but every culture. It's in there somewhere, even if it's buried and forgotten. It's just a way to be sane again, is to open the heart, to connect with it, and then connect with everything else, to heal ourselves first, and then to lend a hand in the healing of the world, to care for ourselves first, and then care for others. I discovered I could do a soul retrieval on myself when people started having spontaneous soul retrievals when I taught them shamanic journeying. But a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, I discovered a part that I'd worked on many times, had soul retrievals. As a traumatized kid, when I was 5 years old, my 1-year-old sister and I were playing, and we were playing tug of war, and something snapped and it hit her in the eye and it cut her eye. And she screamed, and my mother came in, and my mother thought I did something on purpose to hurt my sister. So it was Christmas Day, and she destroyed all my Christmas gifts, threw me in the bedroom, and I tried to explain I didn't do anything, But that day I thought my mother didn't love me, and I lived the next, I don't know, 40 some years thinking she didn't love me. That was a pretty big trauma, and it was only really reconciled on her deathbed when she wanted to make it very clear to me that she didn't love me. And moving. So then, geez, like 15 years after we resolved things on her deathbed, I noticed this part kicking up again. And so I went in there to see why. And I realized that it's living in that memory. And I asked it, would it like to come out of that memory and live in my heart? Or I could keep an eye on it, and protect it. And I explained to it, I think the memory just keeps you in that mental state where you feel unloved. And it said, yeah, it would welcome that. So I took it and I brought it right in my heart, right here. Took a big breath, and it was like expanding the heart, letting it go inside, and then giving it a big hug. And I did that hug I showed you in the first session. Kind of rock it a while. And I've done that since, and I check in on it. There are times where I noticed something can like trigger it. So I want to go in, work with it, help it understand what just happened. But mostly, I have not heard much from it because it seems much happier being here where I have a conscious relationship with it. When it's way back in time, stuck in some memory, I don't have any way to easily get to that. And the idea of integrating the traumatized part so that it never bothers you again is just nonsense. That's rooted in Freudian psychology. That doesn't work. Okay, there's layers of healing that happen over the course of the life cycle with many stages. So different things can touch it at different points. So a shamanic way of healing is ongoing care for. Okay, it's ongoing healing for. And once you know that, you can live your life in a way that you're not suffering very much at all, but suffering will come. It comes to everybody. And you'll know how to approach it when it does. So that's healing versus cure. Cure being the idea that, okay, you took care of that, you'll never have to deal with that again. That just sets you up to be disappointed when some other aspect of a wound opens for you. So if you know how to bring it into the heart where you can tend it, it's a lot easier. And I think that's my final piece of wisdom for today. I thank you all for coming and for participating. I wish we could have a live conversation right now and process things together. That's the limitation of this online form. But I felt your presence. I have seen those whose faces are on the screen. Some of you I've known before, some I haven't. But I am just delighted and honored that you were willing to listen to me for 8 hours over the last 4 weeks.